All right, well, we're about 1 minute after the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and kick off our webinar series, Building with Benefits. Today, we're going to be talking about increasing resilience. First of all, I'm Allie Robbins. Nice to virtually meet everybody. I work on the National Community Solar Partnership, and I'm really pleased today to introduce a real star-hitting group of folks who truly exemplify what it means to increase resilience as a meaningful benefit. But first, we're going to talk about some housekeeping. Sarah, if you can go ahead. Thank you. So as a just quick reminder, this session is being recorded. So just for everybody's awareness, the slides and link to the recording will be made available online after the event. So fear not, you will be able to have them and see them and revisit this webinar as much as your heart desires. And then finally, please put any questions for the panelists and moderators into the chat. You should be able to do that. And if you have any sort of technical issues, you can DM Sarah Fall or me, and I can try and help you out as I'm running this webinar. So thank you all for being here. Next slide, please, Sarah. And just as a quick, getting to know each other in the virtual room, if you feel so desired, please go ahead and put your name, your organization into the chat and why you're joining this conversation about increasing resilience. And again, we're really excited to highlight some of the folks here that are deeply engaged in equitable community solar development. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, that would be awesome. So Sarah, next slide, please. Just as a quick overview of the agenda today, again, hi, Allie Robbins here from the U.S. Department of Energy, introducing everybody. Our moderator today is going to be Seth Mullendorf from Clean Energy Group. He's going to be providing an overview about resilience. And then finally, we're going to highlight some of the awesome projects and programs from Dan Orzak, along with Ingmar Mathiasen and Ben Paulos. And then we're going to have a good 20-minute, hopefully a little bit longer panel discussion along with a Q&A from all of the great folks here in our virtual room. And then finally, we'll do a short closing and ways that you all can stay engaged within the National Community Solar Partnership. So next slide, please, Sarah. And now I'm going to go into a short overview of the National Community Solar Partnership. So next slide, please. So before we talk about what the National Community Solar Partnership is, I just wanted to talk about why the National Community Solar Partnership exists. And I think this slide is one of the most important statistics in support of community solar. A few years ago, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory did a study to get an idea of who had the ability to install a solar system on their roof and access all the benefits of generating your own energy. What they found was that 49% of households and 48% of businesses cannot own a PV system of the right size on their buildings. So what's important to know is that the factors they were considering in identifying those households is how much sunlight hits the roof, so solar potential, and how much space was on the roof to actually generate solar, and whether or not the roof was actually owned by the occupant of the building. They did not take into account whether or not the occupant had the financial resources to install their own system, which means that these numbers actually might be a little bit lower if we were to take that into account. So community solar can really be seen as a solution here because it allows households and businesses to subscribe to benefits from a community solar array that is not on their own roof. But as the right side of this slide shows, there's still far less community solar than would be required to fill this gap of benefits. Right now, when we're looking at all of the electricity that's in the United States, solar makes up less than 10% of all the electricity generation. And community solar is that tiny yellow sliver that you can barely see on this pie chart that only makes up 5% of all solar generation. And then importantly, when you look at this community solar pie chart, just 1% of community solar right now is dedicated to low and moderate income households. We know that the benefits provided by community solar can be especially important for households that have higher energy burdens or limited incomes. So this slide is really the motivation for the National Community Solar Partnership. And we're working as a program to provide resources to support more equitable access to affordable community solar for all U.S. households to really close this gap and ensure that benefits of clean energy flow to everybody. So next slide, please, Sarah. Awesome. So this Venn diagram, now what is the National Community Solar Partnership? And I think this slide gives you a great flavor of all the pieces of the NCSP. And for those of you that are joining for the first time to an NCSP event, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. And the webinars that we're running this summer is part of a broader set of resources. First, to your left in the blue, we publicly share data and provide analysis on the community solar market. So we look at both projects and where they're located, and also other factors that impact community solar development, such as policies, best practices, and program designs. For those that want even more resources, you can actually join the National Community Solar Partnership on our online community platform, and you can get connected to over 1,500 members of the NCSP. And finally, you'll also have access to our technical assistance program that provides on-demand one-on-one assistance with our subject matter experts. So lots of good things coming from the NCSP. And I want to go to our next slide to talk a little bit about our pathway to success priorities. So as we all know, when we set a goal, we have to create steps to make sure that we're addressing the challenges and barriers that are going to help us meet that goal. And that's really where this pathway to success was created. There are 5 major elements. These are designed to address what groups of stakeholders have identified as the 5 key barriers to more equitable access to community solar. So those key barriers include having more resources, so to build technical expertise and capacity. And then we have, obviously the state markets, huge influence on community solar. So we're looking towards more engagement and leadership from states. We talk a little bit about greater and more equitable access to capital. So how can folks build and deploy more projects and get access to capital? And finally, more tools for engaging with customers and acquiring community solar experts. And then our nice darker orange color at the end there is more education and outreach on what community solar is and what benefits it can provide for all households. So all of these initiatives that we're talking about build towards a target to enable community solar to power the equivalent of 5 million households by 2025 and provide over $1 billion in savings. So next slide, please, Sarah. So there's a really good reason that increased resilience is baked into our targets. As you'll notice in the little green banner right at the bottom, we're talking today about the blue portion. There's a major priority from the U.S. Department of Energy in our Justice 40 priorities, which talk about delivering benefits to all households. And what we're going to talk a lot about here today is increasing resilience as a significant implication for these households, especially when you think about the vast geography of our country, protecting against dramatic weather events, and increasing grid benefits, especially when you think about critical infrastructure. So if you're curious about any of these other meaningful benefits, the good news is that today's webinar is one in a series of 6 webinars, including one on innovation and community engagement. So stay tuned at the end for a list of all the webinars that you all are able to join. And then next slide, please. Awesome. So lastly, before I hand things over to Seth, these meaningful benefits are also a key component of a really special program here at the National Community Solar Partnership, and one of the reasons why our panelists are here today. Last year, the NCSP launched the Sunny Awards for Equitable Community Solar to better recognize and amplify best practices of existing community solar projects and programs. We awarded 17 special recognition projects we awarded 17 special recognition prizes to both projects and programs that deliver these meaningful benefits. And we also awarded 5 grand prize winners that were delivering multiple meaningful benefits in their projects and programs. We gave away almost $100,000 in cash prizes. So our guests here today, Dan and Ingemar, represent some of these winning projects, and especially projects that were selected because of their exemplary work providing resiliency through community solar. And I will probably say this again, at least once more during the webinar, but we're really thrilled to have launched another round of this prize. It is open right now today, and there's twice as much funding attached to this, $200,000 this year. So we'll be taking applications until July 14th. So if you or someone in your network that you know is developing community solar with meaningful benefits, we really encourage you to apply. And next slide, please. So why we're all here. At this point, I'm really thrilled to announce Seth to talk about the specific mechanisms, decision points, and partnerships that have led to the successful delivery of increasing resilience. And we will have some time to discuss how we can start providing these benefits at scale. So leading this conversation today is our moderator, Seth Mullendor. Seth is the president and executive director of Clean Energy Group, where he oversees the organization's mission to advance energy justice, catalyze innovation energy strategies, and to address the climate crisis. He previously served as the vice president and project director and leading efforts to enable greater access to the benefits of solar PV and battery storage technologies for low-income communities and communities of color. And he's worked within community-based partners to phase out polluting power plants and bring in clean alternatives. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Seth.
Great. Thanks so much, Allie. And thanks to NCESP for having me here today. It's great to be with you all. So I'm going to set the stage a bit. If we can pull up my slides here. And thanks, Allie, for the introduction. For those of you that aren't familiar with Clean Energy Group, we're a national nonprofit organization. I'm based in Vermont, but we work all across the country to accelerate an equitable transition to the clean energy future. Wait for slides to come up here. There we go. Okay, we can move right along in the slides. Already did my introduction. If you want to check out more of our work, go to cleanegroup.org. Next slide. Just a little background about why I'm here talking about resilience. About 10 years ago, Clean Energy Group, we launched our Resilient Power Project. This was in response to Superstorm Sandy that devastated the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic and caused widespread power outages, leaving millions in the dark and particularly impacting those communities with the least access to resources. So low-income communities, historically marginalized communities, the communities of color, and climate vulnerable communities, such as those with medical vulnerabilities. So this project is really meant to accelerate the development of solar and energy storage as a reliable, clean way to provide backup power to critical community serving facilities in outages, and in extended outages in particular. So we work with communities to provide technical assistance. We help with early stage pre-development assessments of projects. So we've worked with over 300 projects across the country in 27 states now. We also help disseminate a lot of resources, help build capacity through trainings and some funding support to community-based organizations. And we work on advancing inclusive policies and programs at the state and utility level as well. And we do a lot of work with communities and in collaboration with communities. So, all right, that's why I'm here, qualified to talk to some about energy resilience and solar. On the next slide, why are we talking about this in general? And part of this is the reason is energy storage. It's been a wake-up call. I know Sandy was a wake-up call for a lot of people that solar does not typically keep operating when there is a power outage. A lot of people thought, I've got solar on my roof, I'm going to be okay. But solar systems shut off in a power outage almost all the time because of safety concerns. You don't want to have power lines energized when people are out there working on trying to repair lines. So unless you have energy storage, you're not going to have your solar in an outage situation. You can see this is a graph here that I like. This is from a couple years back, but it's from Energy Sage and NABCEP, a survey they did of solar installers about the motivation for battery storage interest with solar installations. You see a big jump between 2019 and 2020 for resilience as the main driver. In 2020, 65% of the installations were looking at resilience. In the early days of energy storage, it was really off-grid systems, which were still a big portion of interest in 2019. But grid-connected systems have really grown in interest. The drivers for this growth in interest have really been a number of reasons. One is just the increased frequency and severity of outages for many reasons. We're not just talking about hurricanes here. We're talking about wildfires in the West. We're talking about tornadoes and derechos in the middle of the country. Oftentimes things just happen and grids are vulnerable. It's not always extreme weather that causes outages. The squirrels actually are a huge reason we have outages all the time in the country. Also, this has been combined with the dropping cost of energy storage, which has really dropped about 90% in cost over the last decade and has become more accessible to the folks, although it's still expensive. And also there's been an increased familiarity with the technology itself. More and more people are more comfortable with energy storage. Next slide. Just to illustrate a real driver of energy storage and solar resilience installations and interest was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. This is a picture of a fire station in Puerto Rico that we worked with in Rincon, Puerto Rico. There's a group called Solar Responders that is looking to equip all of the fire stations in Puerto Rico with solar and battery storage so that they can continue to operate in outage situations. Some parts of Puerto Rico were left without power for a year in the wake of Hurricane Maria. And the systems that we've worked with solar responders to install have weathered continued outages and kept critical services up and running during outages that have happened since Maria. So it's a real success story there. Go to the next slide. I'm just gonna show, this is gonna look a little complicated, but it's really not that bad. Basically, this is what entails a resilient power system or a solar and storage that can provide energy resilience. So of course you have your solar and you have your battery. The solar and the battery can be connected either an AC or DC connection. So a DC connection is basically the solar is directly connected to the battery. You have a charge controller to make sure that the battery gets charged in a way that doesn't damage it. Then that goes to inverter. AC coupling, there's just an extra inverter. Solar goes to inverter, another inverter to the battery. So in addition to the solar and the battery, the big thing is that you have to have a way to disconnect from the grid. So it's not actually shown here, but essentially anything outside of that dotted line, there would be what's called a transfer switch. This is something that disconnects you from the central power grid, from the utility grid, and you're able to establish a grid within the area that you're powering. For many facilities, that doesn't mean backing up the whole facility because solar and storage can be limited in how much power it can support. So there's often a critical load panel, a separate load panel that is behind that transfer switch. And these are the loads that are going to be powered during an outage. Now, there's lots of factors that go into this. And you can also incorporate traditional forms of backup power like generators into this as well for a hybrid system. Adding a battery and solar really helps those run more efficiently. You don't have to run the generator as much, so it can really extend the duration of that as well. If you have enough solar for your battery, you can recharge that and end up having solar refresh the battery every day and keep your critical loads energized throughout a very extended outage if everything is designed correctly and there's enough solar availability. So on the next slide, I just wanted to give folks a sense of what these can look like. So when we're talking about community solar, often we don't think about resilience and energy storage, but increasingly folks are interested in trying to see how you can make this work. So I've got 3 projects I'm going to show you going up in size and what we can do. The first is McKnight Lane. This is actually in Vermont. It was a defunct mobile home settlement that was owned by a community trust in Vermont. The mobile homes were no longer inhabitable, so they redeveloped the project as net zero all electric homes. These are by a company called Vermont. And so we were instrumental in helping them get energy storage for these projects as well. So these are all rental units. And I think there's 13 of these within the McKnight Lane development. Because these are all electric, the battery, it backs up quite a lot during an outage. So it does lighting, does heating and cooling, ventilation, and refrigeration. Should be everything that folks need to be able to weather a storm or weather an outage comfortably. And they have done so, particularly in winter outages that have happened here in Vermont. So the next example is a step up from that as far as the size of a project. This is a project in Washington, D.C. that was installed in 2019, another one that we worked with called Maycroft Apartments. This is owned by or managed by Jubilee Housing. And we worked with another group called New Partners Community Solar. They were installing the solar system you see there, a 64 kilowatt solar system, as part of DC's Solar for All program. What that is you take solar from a number of different rooftops and apply them to the bills of low-income households to offset that bill. In this case, all of the residents of Maycroft Apartments are going to see bill savings from this solar array and others that are participating in the Solar for All program. This project got a grant from the local utility, their foundation, the Pepco Foundation, to add energy storage to the project. So they have a community room in the facility where they have meetings and events. And that room is now has backup power. The batteries are in the picture below. The solar array there is that's a 56 kilowatt hour battery system, and it will provide refrigeration, fans, use of microwaves for food, lighting, TV, and outlets for recharging phones and medical devices. Actually, several residents have electricity-dependent medical devices here. Now they have a place to go and recharge them without having to go to an emergency room to do so. And finally, the last example is a much larger example. And sometimes what people think of more on the size when we're talking about community solar. This is again, an example from Vermont. This is back in 2015, one of the first projects that we really got going through various projects that we're working on. This was in conjunction with the Department of Energy, the Vermont utility Green Mountain Power, and Sandia National Laboratory, as well as the Vermont Department of Public Service. So there was this existing solar array there, a 2.5 megawatt solar array. It's not actually a community solar, but it's of the size of community solar systems that you often see and could be established that way. So the project added 3.4 megawatt hours of energy storage. The energy storage, part of that system are those green boxes that you see on the top right there. It's a pretty big system, and it's actually a combination of lithium ion and lead acid batteries. What this system can do is its isolation from the grid keeps the solar panels and the batteries along with a connection to the local high school in Rutland High School, which is a Red Cross designated emergency shelter. So in this case, these systems actually back up the whole high school and is able to keep it running off of the solar and the batteries during an outage situation. So this is what we're talking about, a larger microgrid system. Microgrid just means something that can isolate from the grid and operate independently. So everything from a home on up to something like this or multiple facilities. So moving on, I just wanted to talk briefly in the next slide about barriers. This is a report that a survey that Clean Energy Group did a couple of years ago, looking at communities serving solar and storage projects that we were working with to talk about several things. One of those was what barriers they're finding. the biggest barrier that people identified was just a lack of information about battery storage. I talked about growing familiarity is still very new and it's much more complicated. Compared to solar, batteries are quite complicated. They can charge, they can discharge, they can provide grid services, they can shift power when you're using it. They can do a lot of different things, and they're quite complicated, which is the next issue, which is the technical issues, just not being familiar with energy storage and not having that expertise. Permitting and interconnection is also an issue. Utilities, a lot of them are not that familiar with energy storage as well, and that can be a process. Then we get into lack of financing and the economic feasibility of projects. These are still quite expensive. Most of the projects, or the 3 projects that I showed you, they all had some form of either grant support or in the case of the first one, the utility Green Mountain Power also provided support for that to provide grid services. That's one thing I didn't talk about earlier. Batteries can also be used to provide services to the grid, like lowering peak demand or providing frequency regulation. The Green Mountain Power project, the big one, actually saved its ratepayers $200,000 in its first year of operation just by lowering demand for 1 hour. The peak hour for the whole regional grid, it saved ratepayers $200,000 with that project and continues to every year. Not just the big project, but Green Mountain Power taps into those at McKnight Lane and smaller household batteries as well to provide grid services. Moving on to the next slide, which is my last slide. This gets into what I'm talking about, all of the things that batteries can do. This is a report, one of the first big reports that I saw about battery storage from Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, in 2015, the economics of battery storage. I still love this image. It creates a graph of all the different services that batteries can provide, from the customer services, so what you call kind of behind the meter, what folks can get backup power is in there, up to services that can provide to the utility and to the full grid. Now, it's not always easy to tap into all of those and create revenue or savings through those. It's much easier at the customer side to get savings. It gets harder and harder as you move up the line. But many states and utilities have started to implement programs where batteries can be compensated for the services that they provide. Just depends on where you are. And actually, you're going to hear about some of that when Dan and Ingmar speak. I know they're going to talk about some of their perspectives as far as the how storage either does or doesn't economically work in their projects, and some of the opportunities and barriers they face. So with that, I'm going to end my portion and turn it over to Dan to speak.
Yeah, hello everyone. Are we good to go here? I'm Dan Orzek. I'm the general manager of the Oregon Clean Power Cooperative. And my slides up here. I've been in the solar business for about 15 years and started doing large scale, what they call utility scale solar projects around the country. Worked projects in New Jersey and Montana and other places. And co-founded in 2015 the cooperative. The co-op is kind of a unique organization. We're a member-owned co-op, and what we do is put up solar in Oregon. But the way we do that is through community participation and particularly financial. So we finance our projects through, in large part, through community members putting up the money for it and then getting paid back. So we were honored to win one of the Sunny Awards last year, and that was for our project, or technically projects, at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. We started talking with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, oh gosh, a few years ago, about putting solar up for them. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival is a world-class theater organization in Southern Oregon. It draws audiences from up and down the West Coast, and it's been around for, I think, close to 90 years. And when we started talking with them, we first looked at their theater, or their theater complex. They have 3 theaters and offices in Ashland, right on the California border. And it's a great Elizabethan theater, but it's not ideal for solar. So it's a historic building, and that means you can't have any solar on the roof that's visible. And the other theaters and buildings, office buildings they had just didn't have a lot of roof space. So we were sort of stumped. But fortunately, right about that time, the theater put up another building a few miles away in the town of Talent, which is their production building. So stage, sets, costumes, costume shop, and so on. So as you can see here, we put solar on the roof of that building. And we also attached a battery. Now, you heard Seth talk about the various reasons for doing solar. In Oregon, there is no mechanism for generating revenue from, for batteries. There's no mechanism for generating revenue from batteries. So with solar, it's going to reduce your electric bill, and that generates a revenue stream that you can use to pay for the solar panels. But batteries don't have any equivalent. And so what that means is the only function that we can tackle in Oregon with batteries is disaster preparedness. So that specific piece of energy resilience. And the only way we can really pay for them is through grants, or if you can get them, donations. So what does that mean in practical terms? So what are we looking at here? Well, you're looking at a solar project on a roof, right? Well, actually not. What we're looking at is two completely unrelated solar projects. So the one on the right is the one I was talking about that has a battery connected to it. That's connected to the building. And the solar panels on the left have no connection with the building. They just happen to be sitting there on the roof. They're connected to the grid. And that's a classic, if you will, community solar program, community solar project. So that power goes in the grid. The utility won't pay you anything more for the battery power. So there's really no way to attach a battery to a community solar project in Oregon. So that's why we're continuing to do both different types of projects. So the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, part of the reason they wanted the battery on this building was because they had designated this building as their emergency operations center, their fallover location in case their main offices in Ashland went down for whatever reason. The grid went down there. So the building that I just showed you is located in this idyllic little town of Talent, Oregon, which looks like this, or looked like this, until 2 years ago when it looked like this. So the Alameda fire tore through the town in September 2020 and literally took out 40% of the town. We had not started construction yet on the solar. So if, hopefully not, but if and when this happens again, or some other natural disaster, they will now have at least one location in town, several locations I'll show you, but a location where there will be some power available in the event of a grid outage. The grid did go down after this fire for about a week. So wildfires are a real concern in Oregon. This is not the only big fire we've had in recent years, but it's not the only reason that we're preparing for natural disasters. This is the other, the Cascadia event earthquake. This, of course, is not the Cascadia event earthquake. This is the Northridge earthquake a few years ago in Southern California, which killed 57 people and put 9,500 people in the hospital. So this is the prequel, if you will, to Cascadia, the Cascadia event earthquake. The Cascadia Fault is about 50 miles off the Oregon coast, and it is going to hit. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The scientists tell us that it comes over the last 10,000 years. It's come every 300 years. So the last one, they were able to tell us through submerged trees that were submerged in the last earthquake. So looking at those tree rings and other records, was in 1700. So we're now, 23 years overdue for it. So what's going to happen when that earthquake hits? This. So FEMA tells us that everything west of I-5, which basically runs through the major population centers in Oregon, is going to be devastated. So if you're trying to provide food and water for 2.5 million people, you're going to need electricity. What are we going to look like after the earthquake? Well, from the air, we're going to look like this. So this is, I believe, the largest grid outage ever to hit the US. In, I think, 2013, a tree branch hits a power line here in Ohio, and within a few minutes, it spreads through 8 states and 2 Canadian provinces. I call this "Where is New York?" So we know that we're going to look like that. We're going to be in the dark in Oregon after the earthquake. And it's going to be that way for 3 months, 6 months, who knows, depending where you are in the state. So what can we do about it? Well, what we've done traditionally is put in generators, particularly in fire, police, medical facilities. So this is Fire Station 210 in Lake Oswego, south of Portland. And like every fire station in the US, it's got a generator. This generator is a diesel generator, and it's got a 95-gallon tank. So how long will that keep the fire station up and running? For about 36 hours. So that's fine, of course, for a short grid outage, but for a major grid outage during a large natural disaster like an earthquake, what's going to happen is, and we know from having seen this in other natural disasters, is that the fire crew is going to be out in the street competing with everyone else for gasoline or diesel to keep their lights on. Now, in Oregon, it's going to be even worse than it was after Hurricane Sandy, because this, what you're looking at here, is a picture from 1910. And they started filling in this lake here in 1910. And what it looks like today is this. So 90% of our liquid fuels in Oregon, first of all, we don't have any refinery capacity in the state. It's all brought in from out of state, and 90% of it is stored here on essentially sand. So the geologists tell us that after the earthquake, it's going to do what they call liquefaction. It's going to shake, and all those storage tanks, most of which were built before they put in building standards, seismic building standards, all those are going to collapse, and all that fuel is going to flow into the Willamette River there, into the Columbia, and out into the Pacific. All right, last thing I want to show you. So this is another fire station. This happens to be the fire station just next to the town of Talent. And what we did here was we put in a 75 kW solar array. Excuse me. And if you turn around, look the other direction, this is what you see on the side of the fire station. So this is, of course, I don't know if you can see, but that's the on-off switch, the inverter, and this is a battery. So the fire station will have some power. None of the batteries installations that we put in are enough to power the whole building. Again, it's a funding question because it's all grant funded. But they will keep some power going to the building, which will provide a place for, as Seth was describing earlier, a place for people to come and charge cell phones, keep critical communications going, perhaps run microwaves and a small refrigerator. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I will turn the screen back over to you guys.
Take it away, Ingmar.
Hey, should I share screen or somebody running it for me?
We got your slides, no worries.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Ingmar Matthijssen. Been working for the Northwest Arctic Bureau up in the Arctic, Alaska. As you can see on this picture that we have, there is the Arctic Circle there on the middle of the picture. So almost all of our solar projects are above the Arctic Circle, which means we have right now 24-hour sun, which is quite amazing thing to work with. So just you can see how far up we are and the size of Alaska, and we're looking at 11 communities here with a total of about 10,000 people, approximately the size of the state of Michigan without the peninsula. and vast differences and logistics to deal with. So I really appreciate the variation between our presentations here and the different ways we are using the solar. So next slide. And of course, the question is why we're here. There is several, so you can go to the next one. For the Northwest Arctic, it started in 2008 with the Energy Summit. Everything spiked for the cost of fuel at $120, $130, $140 a barrel, if you guys remember back then. And that's when we came together as a whole region where all the leaders came into Kotzebue, which was the hub, to create the Energy Summit to see what we were going to do. Back then, we thought we would be running out of oil. Everybody talked about Hubble's curve and there wouldn't be any more oil and all this and that. And obviously, what we know now is there's plenty of oil and people keep pumping oil. What is interesting with the two stars is that this is where what's happened out in the market. The curve, of course, shows the Brent crude oil price over time and how it fluctuates up and down, currently around $70 to $80 a barrel. So it's gone down significantly from 2008, where we were at that time. And we can go to the next slide. All right, so here, this is what it looks like for the average retail prices in our region, though. And we went up instead. We never came back down. And we went from average $5.8 a gallon to now over $10 a gallon for the region. And this has to do with logistics, inflation, and cost of operations that forever increasing, and that some of our fuel is flown in by airlines and airfare transportation is just getting higher and higher. So even though the lower 48 has gone back to similar prices as in 2008, we are not. We are just in survival mode at this point. Next slide. And here's the actual fuel prices. As you can see on the highlighted ones that are bigger than the other one, Ambler, Kobuk, Shungnak. I will be presenting on the Shungnak project here in particular. We have $15 fuel for diesel and stove oil. And if you look at the numbers on the right where it says AVAC and the school system, under AVAC it says $11.50. That is the flown in fuel for Shungnak to operate and run electricity for that particular community. So next slide. That, of course, creates very high electric rates. You can see for the same communities that we now over $1 per kilowatt hour, which is, if it wasn't for what we call the PCE fund in Alaska, probably not survivable for the communities. Under the PCE fund, the actual price is to the left at 33 to 34 cents per kilowatt hour. And it's the balancing out against all other communities in Alaska. Alaska has the PCE fund set up from revenues of the oil services and has been in effect since the oil field Prudhoe Bay was created. Next slide. In 2008, we then started with the energy, we put together the energy plan, which was basically go out and find all the resources that we could find to develop energy with, renewable and non-renewable. And you can see the name of the different villages there in the whole regional operation. Next slide. Since then, we have been running a steering committee every year, 2 times a year, to keep everybody impacted with how the energy program functions, to try to offset all that fuel and try to bring in the renewable energies instead. And it's a partnership between the NANA Regional Corporation and the Northwest Arctic Borough, so a public-private partnership. Next one. And of course, in 2014, something else entered our mind. It wasn't just the diesel fuel. Everybody started to talk about the global warming and how the Arctic is warming up faster than any other place. And we have now a lot of erosion to deal with. The picture in the middle there to the right is Kivalina, which is basically getting washed away in the ocean. And they're in a mode of trying to move the entire village. And so far they've moved the school, which is now 6 miles inland, and they're going to have to slowly move the entire community. which creates a lot of problems trying to develop renewable energy resources for them. Next one. So we put together an update of the energy plan every 4 years. By 2016, we updated it to also include fighting greenhouse gas emissions like CO2, methane, and other harmful effects, and put a progression in place where 10% decrease by 2025, 25% decrease by 2030, and 50% decrease of imported diesel fuel by 2050. So this is for the whole region, all 11 communities. Next one. And to do that, of course, we have to go diesel off, which means turn off the generators. This is just a snapshot from the Shungnak project for you guys that want to look at what it looks like when we're running a battery in a very small microgrid community. The red lines are the generators, and you can see them turning off here at about, let's say, 10 in the morning, 11. And the green line is the solar coming in. The yellow is the inverter that actually produces the power from the battery, and the purple is the battery itself. And we'll just cycle the battery to maximize the amount of incoming renewables. So we maximize the timing for how long we can keep the diesel generators off. Next one. Our single focus back then was to try to stabilize the cost of the fuel by developing local energy resources as much as possible. Primarily wind. We were looking at hydro back then. There was no talk about solar in 2008. The projects were funded and then implemented by the electric utilities to offset the use of diesel fuel. The cost to the households did not change, though, in the communities that receives the PCE funding. That stayed the same. Instead, more alternate energy project was built as they were built by the grants. The allocation of PCE that was coming to the communities from that PCE fund decreased. All the projects are offsetting diesel fuel, and that's the primary objective, but there was no lowering of cost or funding back to the communities. Next one. However, we also had a grant for wind turbines back in 2008 to 2012. We built wind turbines in Buckland and Deering. And if we had looked at the fine print of the grant, it says, as a condition of the grant, independent power producers will agree to sell energy resources for electricity and heat at cost-based rate for the economic life of the project. But it was utilities that was building these projects. So the wind turbines belonged to the utilities, so they couldn't be the IPPs, and we weren't even thinking in those terms back then. Next slide. So what you have here is the amount of data that the wind turbines have created. So it has offset 3.4 million some gallons of diesel fuel since we put them in. The approximate value at $2,700,000 some dollars. Well, and that is the amount of funding that the communities has not received from the PCE fund that they were actually part of before the wind turbine was turned in. So by our thinking with the solar arrays, you'll see that this is now changing, and we are going to turn those two turbines into IPPs also. It'll be happening here within the next month, hopefully, and they will enter the same IPP situation as the other ones and receive those funds to the community instead of losing them. So the next one. So in 2012, we had the first independent IP producer show up in Alaska. Fire Island was built, and it started in September 2012. And it supplies about 2% of the Shugak's retail load on their 25-year power purchase agreement with Cook Inlet Regional Incorporated, which is a subsidiary of Fire Island Wind LLC, owns and operates the facility. So that was the first operational one that came into Alaska, but it's still one that was not owned by a community. It was owned by an entity that was selling power to the utility. In 2012, we implemented the first solar arrays to see if we could help our water and sewer systems bring down cost of energy. And as you can see here, we were innovative in how we're building them. We realized right away that above the Arctic Circle, you have to build them at least 180 degrees. So the one in the middle where you see the water tank Oh, next slide, sorry. I didn't follow through there. So yeah, in 2012, we tested solar for the first time and was innovative in how we were building the arrays by building them circular at 180 degrees to maximize the incoming solar. And by the end of a year of operation, we knew what we had, about 10 to 11% capacity for solar, even though we're above the Arctic Circle. And then we decided to just go for it. So we put solar arrays in all of our water plant communities. You can go to the next slide. And now we've celebrated 10 years of solar PV development in the Northwest Arctic between 2013 and 2023, 250,000 gallons saved and 7.8 million pounds of CO2 not released. And you can see we have more sun in the Northwest Arctic and in Alaska in general than Germany. Next slide. So transition to village independent power producers started in 2020. We built some solar arrays for a couple of communities. And of course, we're thinking about the windmills at that point. You can go to the next one. Why develop independent power producers instead of utility that's producing power? Well, the communities take control over their energy future, developing their own local resources, and this creates a buy-in and good relationship with their utility. They are then able to sustain the PCE support from the state of Alaska and stabilize the energy cost. It's better economics, circular economy, funding collected pays for further development and local workforce expertise. The money stays in the community instead of sending the money to far off communities. Next slide. So reasons for a regional approach. We have the steering committee holding it all together. Regional support can then apply for and manage the big energy grants, including Access Department of Energy and other funding. These villages are very small. In one, we have just 100 people, and it goes up to about 4,000 people in the hub. Economy of scale, increasing efficiency, small single projects too expensive this far out in the Arctic. Develop regional infrastructure can be happening, wind, solar, hydro interties in particular, bulk fuel storage development, and also on a bigger scale, include all households in projects. Next one. There will also be an admin help for independent power producers on the regional setup. IPPs needs PCE calculations, utility rates, and billings set and helped with. Job creation, workforce development, and training and capacity building can happen. And the region speaks as one voice. The whole Northwest Arctic can advocate on behalf of the PCE and statewide energy policy in general. This creates energy security, and it's needed to stop the increasing cost of energy and hedge against the fuel increases and supply disruptions. Next one. So the Shungnak IPP project. Shungnak was 223 kilowatt, built in 2021, and used 550 bifacial 405 watt panels, Blue Planet's environmentally friendly LFP battery, and is capable of holding the two communities which are tied together, Shungnak and Kobuk, for 2 hours without generators or solar power. The capacity of the battery is 250 kilowatt, 352 kilowatt hours. Started construction was in 21, completed in September 2021. Budget cost 2.363 million, funded by the USDA High Energy Cost Grant for 1.3 million, and in-kind VIF, Village Improvement Fund, and Northwest Arctic Borough funds, that is public-private partnership, at just over $1 million. Next one. Okay, so how did we do it? Shungnak Kobuk Solar. Grant opportunity happened for USDA High Energy Cost was secured by the two tribes by allowing the borough, Northwest Arctic Borough that I work for, to apply on behalf of the communities. The communities were then interconnected already with a power line, so the proposed project was benefiting both of them. Through an MOA working agreement, it was executed between the two tribes to become an IPP and work together. A power purchase agreement was executed then with the utility AVAC, and AVAC pays for the solar power, and we cover the cost partially from the PCE fund that, of course, if AVAC had the array, they would have lost. And another MOA that is then executed with the borough for help with administration and investment of funds. An energy fund is then established for the communities, and funds are dispersed for insurance, maintenance, and eventual further build out of the solar array. Next one. And that led to the 2 awards. Project Award of the Year in 2021, and the Sunny Award, Most Equitable Project, 1 of the 10 in 2022. So this is a loud shout out to all the partners, USDA, Shungnak IRA, Kobuk IRA, Borough, NANA, AVAC Tech, and all the workers that has been, including Sunny Awards and Solar Builder Magazine. It's really propelled us into the limelight for, you know, everybody wants to do this project or similar projects up here right now. Next one. So here are the financials of that project. Estimated gross revenues about 120,000. You can see the breakdown of insurance, electric, service fees, tribal employee, fuel, and operations, and they still netted about $90,000, which is actually going to be higher this year since now it's optimized to work a little bit better than it did the previous year. Some of that funding is then invested, so you can go to the next slide. First, I just run this one here because we're building this one today. This is a similar project that is in the works at the moment in Noatak, a sister village, similar in size, and has a slightly different battery on this one, a Cronus Pylon-Tech, also an LFP battery, environmentally friendly battery, and will hold the community for 2 hours. Construction is started and should hopefully complete in July of 2023. More expensive, 2.946, almost 3 million. And multiple entities are helping out with the funds for this project. Noatak is our most expensive village. They have no access with roads or water. It's everything they do is flown in. Next one. We also this year have full funding for the Selawik IPP and REPOP program, which is another big array. Initially, it was set up for 130 kilowatt with a 1 megawatt battery to be able to hold that community for 4 hours. Their water and sewer system, it's hard to see in the picture there, but it is overland. This is frozen tundra, and the water and sewer systems are sitting on top of the ground. And if they don't get enough snow, in 40 below, they freeze up extremely fast. They have to have backup power that can hold them for several hours so we can go and help them if the generator systems go down. So hence 1 megawatt battery to give them at least 4 hours of operation to get people in place. So this one is fully funded and will be hopefully completed in 2024. It's currently under engineering status. And the next one. So here's the full 5-year plan for build out. We'll build all our communities up to 1 megawatt. They will all be community owned solar operations owned by the tribes, by the households themselves. At full capacity, they should be at 3.6 gigawatt hours available incoming with a total offset of 260,000 gallons per year between all of them. This does not include the actual Kotzebue itself, which is the hub, and which would by then also be able to do about 250. So at full build out within 5 years, we're hoping to offset 500,000 gallons of fuel that we then are producing by primarily solar, but also some wind in there. And the next one. So this is the operational structure of how we did this. The 2 public-private partnerships are on top, the Borough, NAB, and NANA, the Northwest Regional Corporation. Revenues can come in from those sources on the scene. They're overseen by ESC, which is the Energy Steering Committee, and WAIPPs, Northwest Arctic Independent Power Producers, and the REPOP program that is funded under this can then create training, repair, maintain equipment, local job creation, grant writing, administration, financial management, project development, and so on and so forth. Basically, the funds that are coming in through this system makes the system self-sustaining for the communities. And once they're granted in, they will be able to take care of themselves with the incoming funds. So you can see the IPPs that are now going to be in production this year, and then we will add the other ones in the next few years. At the bottom, you'll see an investment fund, so that every year we will take at least 50% out of the incoming money and invest it in a rainy day fund on the stock markets, as we have one at the borough anyway. So each community will end up with its own little energy fund that can be used for other things, like maybe heat pumps or energy efficiency for the households, and so on and so forth. I think this is my last slide. We can take one more there. And yeah, okay, so this is where we're at. Energy Steering Committee, 15 years and going. Goals and lessons learned, make sustained effort, realize that the changes come slowly with understanding of new ways in operation. Continue to work with the regional energy plan. It's the vision for the future, from the people, for the people. And make sure the document gets updated periodically, as it is a dynamic living document that needs to be able to adapt to the changes when new thinking and resources comes along, and hopefully it will never be completed. So the policy, do we develop energy resources for short-time profits, or do we develop energy resources that can sustain the region for the foreseeable future and create a cleaner environment for our children? I think that's the last one. You can go for the last one there. And that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I've learned so much from you all already. If we can go ahead, Ben, I know you have to jump at the top of the hour. So I don't know if you have a few minutes that you can stay to run through your slides, or if not, we can jump right to the discussion.
Yeah, I got about 2 minutes and I have 2 slides, so that'll do.
Love it. Rock and roll.
Can you put them up? Okay, so I'm Ben Paulus. I'm an affiliate with Berkeley Lab, which means I'm part-time, and I have other clients, including East Bay Community Energy. EBCE is a community choice aggregator. For those of you in states that don't have them, it's a sometimes called Muni Light. Local government agencies come together. They collaborate to buy power on behalf of their customers. And then they run a number of local programs as well. EBCE serves the East Bay, Oakland, Fremont, et cetera. They were interested in this idea of using solar and storage to provide backup power for critical facilities, fire stations, shelters, hospitals and clinics, et cetera. So we wrote a proposal to our local air district, which funded it because we have a lot of backup generators, which cause a lot of pollution, start fires, and kill people. EBCE hired engineers who surveyed all of the critical facilities among their member communities, local governments. They did they selected some where solar and storage were going to be viable, that had high critical power needs. They did all the pre-engineering for those buildings and made a standard contract for bidders. This resulted in more bidders and lower prices. So it's essentially looking for ways to lower the cost of these microgrids on critical facilities. From the city's perspective, the advantages were that there were no upfront costs. It was all financed through EBCE and paid back through the city utility bills. There was no new expertise required by city staff. They didn't have to learn how microgrids work and how to build them. And it created certainty for energy bills because it involved a long-term power purchase agreement. The resilience benefit, the power during outages, was sort of a free addition, a free benefit. So next slide. The results for phase 1 were that they worked with 4 cities and they narrowed it down to 30 critical facilities. They're doing 3 megawatts of solar and 6 megawatts of megawatt hours of batteries on these 30 facilities. The picture here is the police headquarters in Fremont. The previous picture was a fire station in Fremont. Those were done previously. So the phase 1 projects are going ahead. They're working now on phase 2, and the goal is to shoot for 50 to 100 systems in a number of other, in the next list of cities, including Oakland. EBC has applied for a grant from the DOE program called GRIP, the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program. That would help reduce the cost of everything and provide, valuable public service. But it's important to note that the systems are mostly cost-effective without a federal grant, because the system helps pay for itself over time. They're net metered solar systems. The batteries are used for virtual power plant operation that EBC has set up, and it provides shifting of power demand from off-peak or from on-peak to off-peak. California, as you may know, has ended net metering. We're moving to a net billing system. So future projects are going to have to really take most advantage of the battery systems to create more value, because the retail net metering is going away. So I do have to run, I'm sorry, but if you want to learn more about this project, it's ebce.org/resilient facilities, as shown on the screen. You can learn about the projects that are going to be contracted and the ones that are going to be in the works. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Allie.
Thanks so much for sticking with us, Ben. Really appreciate it. So now we're going to move into the discussion and Q&A portion. As a reminder, folks, please feel free to put your questions into the chat. I will go ahead and turn it back over to Seth, our moderator. And I do just want to have a timing adjustment. I'm going to skip the closing slides, but they will definitely be available online. We will send them out to the whole group. So fear not, we're still going to go until 3:15 with the full panel discussion. So Dan and Ingemar and Seth can take it away from here, and I will help field questions where possible.
Yeah, we did a lousy job leaving a lot of time for questions, but there was a lot of excellent information in there. So while we wait to see if anybody has anything that comes in, Dan and Igmar, I think people would love to just tap your brains on this. I mean, I think it would be really useful for folks to hear, when you first started approaching these projects, where did you go to find out information on these? Where did you even start?
Dan, you want to start?
Sure, good question. We mostly relied on our solar installers. We work with a few, and there's pretty close partnerships there. We talk with a number of battery companies as well, but pretty much everything, we left the technical details to the EPCs, the installers.
Okay, on our side, as far as where did we go? Well, like you saw in my presentation, it really started really slow with small projects that we put together with contractors when solar first started to show up as an available solution. And as it advanced, we started to look for people then that would do a RFP with us. We put the project out for an RFP through the borough and got people interested, and compared notes, gave preference to people that are close to us in Alaska, and even as close to the borough as we can possibly get it because of logistics, and bring the price down. And worked with different funders, and we were really happy when the Shungnak project was approved by USDA High Energy Cost Grant as a pilot project, basically at that point, and got so successful together with the rest of the stakeholders. So Department of Energy is now helping a lot. In our region, it's tribal-owned operations. So the tribal section of Department of Energy is really helpful at helping with that. And we are also, of course, very underserved. That all said, they're granted in projects, but we know now that if all our utilities happen to have microgrids and a battery, we can actually go out and borrow money for a solar array now, and it'll pay itself off just under 10 years or something like that for a 25-year lifespan.
Great. I'll see a question came in from Ali here that I can address, just about the cost of storage falling. 90% over the last decade, it has dropped dramatically, and that's one of the reasons you're hearing a lot more about storage these days. A lot of projections do expect that to continue falling, but that hasn't happened in the near term. There's been a lot of inflation. There's been a lot of supply chain issues, and the cost of batteries actually has gone up recently over the past year or so. Experts do expect those pressures to ease and then those to start coming back down and start following that learning curve that you've seen for solar and wind as well. But it's going to take a time even just to get back to where it was as far as the costs go. Let's see, we've got another question here. It's a question about match dollars. So were any of you able to use your future energy savings, Dan and Ingmar, as a match for funding opportunities? I know that's often difficult to come up with those grant match dollars.
So I can take it on first, I guess. I mean, we haven't used that funding yet, but that's the intent. We are already looking at optimizing Shungnak because we now know that the more we go diesel off, the more we actually have to keep the generators warm. If it's 40 below outside, you turn off the generators and they no longer provide their own heat, we need to put optimization modules and keep working with this system so that it gets even better than before. And we will use the money as a leverage, if not outright buying equipment at this point, but leveraging grants with it. That's the whole intent with keeping the money in the community. Yeah, and it can leverage other things like, you know, community heat pumps, for example, and try to leverage grants. But we are using our own VIF, Village Improvement Fund funding, and NANA funding to leverage grant already, but they're not from the projects yet, right? So once this whole IPP operation is up and running, it'll be self-sustaining.
And Dan, for your project, the storage didn't provide the energy savings, did it?
Yeah, no, as I was saying during our presentation, there's the short answer is no. There's really no revenue stream, certainly no guaranteed revenue stream from batteries in Oregon. So we are reliant on, at least at the moment, I mean, there's efforts to change that in the legislature, but you know, that's a multi-year process. So at the moment, we're reliant on grants. The good news is that there's, over the last couple of years, there's a lot more interest, a lot more focus on microgrids and storage, and there's more funding. So both of the, what they call the IOUs, the major utilities in Oregon are now providing grants with a major focus on storage, and there's some other state money that's been available for storage projects too.
Great, yeah, leveraging those state dollars sometimes to be able to apply to federal grants is very valuable.
Seth, I'll mention one other thing, which is people may be aware of this. So the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, the tax credits which have been available for solar are now extended to batteries as well. So that's a major, you get 30% at least from the federal government.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Beth, I can't tell you for sure if you should replace your generators with batteries, but I will put in a plug. Reach out to folks at Clean Energy Group, because we do offer some advisory services to folks. The question, if we have time for it, was just one piece of advice. If you both could offer one piece of advice, lessons learned, something that you would share with folks to help them as they enter into this process. Love to hear anything that you would share with folks. Ingmar, you want to start?
Go ahead.
You want me to start then?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So so I would say the biggest thing that has been successful for us is collaboration. Everybody, I mean, we have had our steering committee as a totally open public meeting 2 times a year for 15 years, and everybody can come in. Whether you're a naysayer, no sayer on global warming, or you want to keep diesel, doesn't matter. Come in and talk to us, and then we'll figure out the future together. I mean, each community needs to do that. We can't just have the big corporations out there controlling the world, and it has to go on a community level, community by community, making decisions on what they want their energy structure to look like. So that's the biggest takeaway from me.
Yeah, and you know, I would absolutely echo that. What I was going to say was, just tear out your hair now, because you're going to do it somewhere along the process. Solar is now pretty much commodity, but battery storage is still somewhat on the cutting edge. So you're going to run into hurdles. Don't let them stop you. Every project is going to be different, and it's getting easier.
Fantastic. Those are a great piece of advice. And I think we'll probably close out the questions now. So Allie, back to you.
Very motivational note to end on. Thank you, Seth, Ingmar, Dan, and Ben, who's no longer here, but thank you all and really appreciate your time today. There are 3 more webinars coming up for you all, so please tune in and keep in touch with the NCSP. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.